They called him the Reaper, not because he harvested souls with a scythe, but because when Dominic Blackthorne walked into a room, every man inside understood that their next breath was a gift he could revoke at any moment. Tonight, the most powerful criminals in Chicago sat frozen in Elysium, the underground restaurant where fortunes changed hands and lives ended over glasses of 50-year scotch. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across black marble floors. Velvet chairs held men who ordered executions without blinking. And every single one of them had stopped breathing, because the Reaper's dogs were about to kill someone. It started with a crash. A new server named Jake, barely 22, had slipped on the polished floor. His tray flew from his hands, porcelain plates shattering against marble like gunshots in a cathedral. The sound unleashed hell. 3 Dogo Argentinos exploded from beneath table 7. Titan led the charge, 130 pounds of pure white muscle, his growl rolling through the restaurant like thunder before lightning strikes. Orion flanked left, moving with impossible speed for something so massive. Phoenix completed the formation from the right, smaller than his brothers but no less deadly, a black patch marking his left ear like a brand. Jake stood paralyzed amid the wreckage of broken dishes. His face had gone the color of old bone. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged because what sound could possibly stop what was coming? The dogs moved like 3 white missiles, locked onto a single target. No one in Elysium moved to help. These men had seen what the Reaper's hounds could do to human flesh. They had heard the stories. Some of them still had nightmares about what remained after Titan finished with a traitor 2 years ago. Jake was going to die. Everyone knew it. And then a waitress did something insane. She did not run. She did not scream. She did not even flinch. Ivy Callahan stepped directly into the path of 3 killing machines and dropped to her knees on the cold marble floor. Her head bowed, her neck exposed. Her hand rose, palm open, in the universal signal that every trained dog recognized. And from her throat came a sound that did not belong in this world of blood and power. A low tone, beginning with a sharp click of the tongue, flowing into a descending hum that seemed to reach something primal in the charging beast. Titan skidded to a halt. His claws scraped white lines across the black marble as his massive body fought against momentum. He stopped less than 2 feet from her face. Hot breath washed over her auburn hair. Saliva dripped onto her shoulder, but his jaws stayed closed. Orion halted next, then Phoenix. 3 killing machines stood frozen, their muscles still coiled, their eyes locked on the woman kneeling before them. One word left her lips, barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute command. Sit. Titan sat. Orion sat. Phoenix sat. The silence in Elysium was so complete that every man present could hear his own heartbeat pounding against his ribs. Ivy remained on her knees, her hand now resting on Titan's massive chest, feeling the beast's heartbeat slow from rage to something approaching calm. She did not look up. She did not meet anyone's eyes. She simply stayed there, small and thin in her black server's uniform, holding 3 monsters in the palm of her hand. Footsteps broke the silence. Dominic Blackthorne emerged from the shadows of table 7. He stood 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a $15,000 suit like armor. A scar ran from his left temple down his cheek, a souvenir from a fight no one else had survived. His black hair was slicked back, revealing a face carved from granite and cruelty. But his eyes, those pale winter eyes, held something that did not belong there. Wonder. "Stand up," he said. His voice was ice wrapped in velvet. Ivy meant to obey. She meant to rise, apologize, and disappear before this man decided she knew too much to live. But Titan disagreed. When Dominic stepped within 3 feet of Ivy, his lead dog turned and placed himself squarely between her and his master. A low growl rolled from Titan's throat, a warning growl directed at Dominic Blackthorne, his own dog, the beast he had spent $200,000 training. The monster that had never allowed anyone but him to touch it was protecting a stranger. Dominic stopped walking. Something flickered across his face, too fast for most people to catch. He was jealous of his own dogs. "Who are you?" he asked. Not a demand, a genuine question. Ivy looked up, and their eyes met for the first time. Green met gray. Something shifted in the air between them. Something neither understood. "Just a waitress," she said. "Please do not fire me." She had no idea that within 2 weeks she would be living in his fortress. She had no idea that within a month she would be falling in love with a man the world called death. And she had no idea that the monster hunting her had already found her trail. The basement apartment smelled like mold and broken dreams. Ivy unlocked the door at 2 in the morning, her hands still trembling from everything that had happened at Elysium. The manager had given her the rest of the night off. More accurately, the manager had begged her to leave before Dominic Blackthorne decided to ask more questions. She stepped inside and reached for the light switch. Her blood turned to ice. The apartment had been ransacked. Clothes scattered across the floor. Drawers yanked out and overturned. The thin mattress ripped open, stuffing exploding like snow across the concrete. But the message on the wall, the message was what stopped her heart, written in red lipstick, the shade he always made her wear. "Found you, Ivy. Come home." Garrett Holden had come to Chicago. After 2 years of running, 2 years of hiding, 2 years of sleeping with one eye open in cities she never stayed long enough to know. He had found her. Ivy stood in the wreckage of her tiny life, and memories crashed over her like waves pulling a drowning woman under. She was 19 again, standing in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and approaching death, holding her mother's hand as cancer took its final victory. Margaret Callahan drew her last breath on a Tuesday afternoon, leaving behind $280,000 in medical debt and 2 children who had nothing left but each other. Ivy was 20, and she still remembered the exact moment Garrett Holden walked into her life. He wore a detective's badge and a father's smile. He said he had known their parents. He said he wanted to help. She believed him. It was the worst mistake of her life. The touching started slowly, a hand on her shoulder that lingered too long, a hug that pressed too close, then the demands, then the threats, then the beatings when she dared to refuse. He was a senior detective with connections throughout the Chicago Police Department. Who would believe a girl drowning in debt against a man like him? No one. The answer was no one. So Ivy endured. For 4 years, she swallowed her screams and hid her bruises and did whatever it took to keep her little brother safe. Kieran was only 13 when their mother died. He needed to finish school. He needed a normal life. He needed to not know what his sister did in the dark to keep a roof over his head. But Kieran grew up, and Kieran saw. She was 22 when her brother turned 16. She remembered his birthday cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, his favorite. She remembered the way he smiled when he blew out the candles. She remembered the way that smile died when he came home early that night and found Holden beating her unconscious on the kitchen floor. Kieran grabbed a baseball bat. 16 years old, barely 140 pounds. But he swung at Holden like he was trying to save the world. Holden did not say a word. He simply grabbed Kieran by the throat, dragged him onto the balcony, and pushed. 4th floor. Ivy crawled to the edge, looked down, and saw her baby brother lying on the sidewalk, blood pooling from his head, his eyes still open and staring at the sky like he was searching for her one last time. She screamed his name until her throat tore. It did not bring him back. Holden staged the scene with the precision of a man who had done this before. Depressed teenager, history of anxiety, tragic suicide. No witnesses except a sister in severe shock and a respected detective who had tried so hard to help. 3 months later, Ivy discovered she was pregnant. Not from love, never from love. From the nights Holden forced himself on her while she lay barely conscious, still drowning in the grief of losing her brother. When Holden found out about the pregnancy, he was not pleased. Evidence, he called it. A complication. He beat her until she was no longer pregnant. Ivy woke up in a pool of her own blood on the bathroom floor, and something inside her finally snapped. That night, she burned every document. She took the money Kieran had been saving in a shoebox, money he had been putting aside to buy a microscope because he wanted to be a veterinarian someday. She bought a fake identity and disappeared. 2 years, 12 cities, countless nights spent afraid to sleep. And now he had found her. Ivy stood in her destroyed apartment and pulled out the black business card Dominic Blackthorne had given her. Silver letters gleamed in the dim light. One monster was hunting her. The only place left to hide was inside the den of another monster. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. 3 in the morning, a cold voice answered. You must have changed your mind. When can I start? Silence for a moment. Then, a car will be there in 20 minutes. Exactly 20 minutes later, a black Mercedes with bulletproof windows stopped in front of her basement stairs. Ivy climbed inside with a torn backpack, holding everything she had left in the world. One clean change of clothes, a photograph of Kieran grinning on his 10th birthday, and the broken pieces of a hope she could not bring herself to throw away. The Blackthorne estate rose from the Chicago suburbs like a Gothic nightmare given form. Iron gates 15 feet tall bore carved images of hunting dogs. The mansion itself stood 3 stories of dark gray granite, its narrow windows cut like medieval arrow slits. Security cameras hid in every shadow. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter with submachine guns barely concealed beneath black coats. This was not a home. This was a fortress designed to keep the entire world out. Dominic waited on the front steps as the Mercedes pulled up, his 3 dogs sitting in perfect formation at his feet. Dawn had just begun to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. The moment Ivy stepped out of the car, Titan, Orion, and Phoenix rose as one. Their tails wagged. Their bodies trembled with excitement. They moved toward her like soldiers returning to their commanding officer. Not toward their master, toward her. Something flickered across Dominic's face, too fast for most people to catch. Rules, he said, leading her inside. First, never enter my office on the 3rd floor. Second, never leave the estate without security. Third, do not ask about my business. Fourth, you may go anywhere in the house except the 3rd floor. They walked through hallways designed to intimidate. Black marble floors, charcoal walls, paintings that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. And finally, Dominic stopped before an oak door and turned to face her, those winter-pale eyes cutting straight through her defenses. The dogs are priority 1. Anything they need, you provide? He opened the door. Ivy had to stop herself from gasping. The room was larger than the entire basement she had lived in for 6 months. A king-size bed dressed in white silk sheets, a carved walnut wardrobe, a private bathroom with a marble-soaking tub, a window overlooking a professionally designed dog training field. Any questions? Dominic asked. Ivy looked around the lavish room, then back at the man who ruled Chicago's underworld. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why are you helping me? Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then his gaze dropped to the 3 dogs who had arranged themselves around her feet like guards protecting royalty. Because for the first time in 5 years, he said, his voice carrying something she could not identify. They want to protect someone who is not me. I need to know why. He turned and walked away without another word. The first time Ivy saw Wren Blackthorne, she understood why the Reaper had not completely turned to stone. 3 days into her stay at the estate, Ivy was working with the dogs in the training field when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found a 7-year-old girl watching her with enormous brown eyes. Wren had her father's black hair, falling in waves past her shoulders, but her eyes were warm, the color of honey in sunlight, the color her mother's eyes must have been. She clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest. Mr. Pepper. The bear had been her mother's, given to Wren on the day she was born, the same day her mother died. You are the dog lady, Wren announced. I suppose I am, Ivy replied. Phoenix is sad, Wren said, her voice carrying the absolute certainty that only children possess. He pretends he is not, but I can tell. He needs a friend. Ivy looked at Phoenix, lying apart from his brothers in the corner of the field, the smallest of the 3 dogs, the one with shadows in his eyes that never quite went away. How do you know he is sad? Ivy asked. Wren considered this question with the gravity of a philosopher. Because he looks like Daddy when Daddy thinks nobody is watching, like he is waiting for somebody to come home, but he does not know who. Victor Caney, Dominic's right-hand man, told Ivy the story of the 3 dogs on her 4th day at the estate. 5 years ago, Dominic had led a raid on an illegal dog fighting ring operating in Chicago's industrial district. The fighters who ran the operation made the mistake of refusing to pay tribute to the Blackthorn organization. They paid with everything. Among the carnage, Dominic found 3 Dogo Argentino puppies. Titan and Orion had been bred as fighters, trained from birth to kill. But Phoenix had been a bait dog, the smallest, the weakest. Kept in a dark cage for months, beaten and starved, used as target practice for the other dogs to sharpen their killing instincts on. The boss spent a fortune on trainers, Victor said, military specialists, behavioral experts. Titan and Orion responded well, but Phoenix never fully trusted anyone, not even the boss. That dog carries scars you cannot see. Ivy looked at Phoenix, cowering in the corner of the training field, flinching at every loud sound, refusing to enter any enclosed space. She saw herself, a soul broken by cruelty, rebuilt just enough to survive, but never quite whole. That afternoon, she abandoned the training exercises. She simply sat in the corner with Phoenix, maintaining distance, making no demands. 1 hour passed, then 2. The sun began to set, painting the Chicago sky in shades of fire. Phoenix did not move closer, but he did not move away either. And when Ivy began to speak, telling the empty air about a 16-year-old boy named Kieran who loved animals more than anything, who saved a hamster named Biscuit and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, who died trying to protect his sister from a monster wearing a badge. When she told the story of watching her brother's eyes search the sky for her one last time, when the tears finally came, the tears she had not allowed herself to shed in 2 years, Phoenix moved, slowly, hesitantly, like a creature expecting punishment for every step. He crossed the distance between them and laid his head on her lap. His tail wagged, just once, just slightly, but it was enough. Ivy stroked his white fur with trembling fingers, and both of them cried in their own way for everything they had lost. "We are both broken," she whispered, "but maybe damaged souls can mend each other." From a third-floor window, Dominic Blackthorn watched the scene unfold. His dog, the one he had never been able to fully reach, the one whose trust he had spent 5 years trying to earn, was lying in the lap of a woman he had known for 4 days. Something shifted in his chest, something he had thought died with his mother 24 years ago. He did not have a name for it yet, but it terrified him more than any enemy ever had. The storm came 2 weeks into Ivy's stay at the estate. Not an ordinary storm, the most violent summer tempest Chicago had seen in 20 years. Winds exceeding 75 miles per hour, lightning tearing across the sky like wounds in the flesh of heaven. Ivy woke at 11 at night to the sound of howling. Not wind, dogs. She ran downstairs without grabbing a coat, wearing only a thin nightgown, her bare feet slapping against cold marble. The kennel stood at the corner of the garden, built of steel and bulletproof glass like a miniature bunker. Through the glass, she saw her worst fears confirmed. Titan was slamming his massive body against the walls, 130 pounds of muscle crashing into steel again and again. Orion ran in frantic circles, his bark shrill and desperate. Phoenix had curled into the corner, shaking so violently she could see it from outside. Flashback. The thunder had dragged them back to the fighting pit, back to nights locked in darkness with screams and gunshots. "Do not go in there," Victor shouted behind her. "Last year a guard tried to calm them during a storm. Titan bit his arm clean off." Ivy did not listen. She opened the kennel door and stepped inside. The 3 dogs turned toward her. Titan's growl rolled through the enclosed space like an engine of destruction. Orion's eyes held no recognition, only animal terror. Phoenix stayed frozen in his corner. Ivy did not run, did not scream, did not try to assert dominance. She lay down on the cold, wet concrete floor, curled into herself like a child, exposed her neck and belly in complete submission, and began to sing. The lullaby her mother had sung every night before the cancer came. A simple melody about stars and peaceful sleep, about being loved and never alone, about closing your eyes knowing someone was watching over you. Her voice trembled against the roar of the storm outside, small and fragile, but she kept singing as if that melody was the only thread keeping all of them from falling into the abyss. 1 minute passed, 2, 3. Then warmth pressed against her. Phoenix had crawled across the kennel floor and pressed himself against her stomach. Still shaking, still afraid, but no longer alone. Orion came next, settling behind her back like a living shield. And finally Titan, the fierce leader. The one who trusted no one except his master. He lowered himself in front of her, his massive head resting on his paws, his eyes never leaving her face. Ivy lay there surrounded by nearly 400 pounds of muscle and teeth, humming the lullaby, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. And when she finally opened her eyes, she found Dominic Blackthorne standing in the kennel doorway, drenched by rain, his white shirt plastered to his body. He stepped inside without speaking, closed the door against the storm, sat down against the steel wall, less than a meter from where she lay. "That song," he said. His voice was different, softer. "Where did you learn it?" "My mother. She sang it to me and my brother every night, before she died." Silence stretched between them. "My mother used to sing too," Dominic said finally, "when she was cooking, cleaning, when she thought no one was listening." Ivy turned her head to look at him. In the dim emergency lights, she saw something on his face she had never seen before. Pain, old pain, scarred over but never healed. "What happened to her?" she asked. "My father killed her." His voice was flat, empty. "When I was 12, right in front of me." The words hung in the air between them. "So I killed my father," Dominic continued. "That same night, with the knife she used to cut my birthday cake a week earlier. That is how I inherited this empire. Not because I wanted it, because there was no one else." Ivy understood then. She understood the ice in his eyes, the walls around his heart, the 3 dogs who were the only family he acknowledged. He was a 12-year-old boy who had been forced to kill his father to avenge his mother. And that boy was still somewhere inside the monster the world called the Reaper. "I lost my brother too," she whispered. "He was 16. He died trying to protect me, and I could not do anything. I just stood there and watched." Dominic turned to look at her, and for the first time his gaze was not cold or calculating. It was the gaze of someone who had stood at the edge of the same abyss. "It was not your fault," he said. "We are never at fault for what others choose to do. But we punish ourselves anyway, do we not?" Tears streamed down her face. "Because surviving when they are dead feels like the greatest sin." Dominic reached out. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear with a gentleness Ivy would not have believed him capable of. "You are dangerous, Ivy Callahan," he whispered. "You make me want things I buried a long time ago." She did not answer. She did not need to, because in the next moment he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was light as breath, tentative, a question neither of them knew how to ask, and Ivy answered. The weeks that followed passed like a dream Ivy did not dare believe was real. Dominic began appearing in the kitchen every morning when she came down to eat. At first he said nothing, simply sitting across from her with black coffee and a newspaper. But gradually the silent mornings became brief exchanges. The brief exchanges became longer conversations. The longer conversations stretched until both of them forgot the time. He asked about her work at animal shelters, about the strays she had helped rehabilitate, about how she had learned to speak the language of damaged creatures. She asked about the books lining his library shelves, about the painting of his mother hidden in a corner of the second floor, about why he had saved 3 dogs from a fighting ring when he could have simply burned it down and walked away. He was no longer a ghost in his own house. He began appearing at her training sessions, standing at the edge of the field with his hands in his pockets, watching her work. He started knocking on her door every night to ask if she needed anything, though they both knew it was just an excuse to see each other one more time before the day ended. Wren noticed everything. "Daddy smiled today," she told Ivy one afternoon. "He never smiles, but he smiled when he was talking about you." She tilted her head, considering Ivy with those honey brown eyes. "My mommy's in heaven. Daddy told me she became a star. Every night I wave at her, and I think the stars get brighter. Maybe your brother's waving back at you too." Ivy knelt down to Wren's level, tears burning in her eyes. "You know what I think? I think your daddy was never broken. He was just waiting for the right people to remind him that he still knew how to love. Like Phoenix, Ren said. Phoenix was waiting too. And then you came. What Ivy did not know was that Garrett Holden had spent 2 months preparing for this moment. He had found her trail through a private investigator 6 weeks ago, followed it to Chicago, discovered she was hiding behind the most dangerous man in the city, but Holden was patient. Holden was connected. He reached out to the Corsetti family, the Blackthorn's oldest enemies. He offered them something they had wanted for 15 years, a way inside the fortress. I can give you the security codes, Holden told them. I can give you the patrol schedules. I can give you everything you need to breach that estate and kill Dominic Blackthorn. And what do you want in return? The Corsetti boss asked. The girl. Just the girl. She belongs to me. The Corsettis agreed. They did not care about one woman. They cared about ending the Blackthorn dynasty. Neither of them knew that their alliance would be their undoing. The night everything changed began with a phone call. Ivy was reading in her room when her door opened and Dominic walked in, his face carved from stone. I had people watching the annual gala last week, he said. They photographed a man who watched you all night. Detective Garrett Holden, Chicago Police Department. The blood drained from Ivy's face. Who is he to you? Dominic asked. And do not lie to me. So she told him everything. She told him about her mother's death, about the debt, about Holden appearing like a savior and turning into a nightmare. She told him about 4 years of torture, about Kieran being pushed from the 4th floor, about burying her brother in silence because no one believed a debt-ridden girl against a respected detective. She told him about the pregnancy, about the beating, about waking in a pool of her own blood, knowing the child she never had the chance to love was gone forever. When she finished, silence smothered the room. Then she heard glass shatter. She looked up and saw Dominic standing by the table, the whiskey tumbler in his hand crushed to pieces, shards embedded in his palm, blood dripping onto the floor. He had not even noticed. His face was twisted in a fury so pure it burned like fire. I will kill him, he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I will find him and make him suffer in ways he cannot imagine. He has power, Ivy said, her voice breaking. He has connections in the police. He could destroy you, destroy everything you have built. I am not worth that. Dominic crossed the room in 2 strides. His bloodied hand lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Never, he said, each word hammered like a nail into stone. Never say you are not worth it. You survived the hell he created. You stood up when anyone else would have broken. You deserve everything good in this world. And I swear to you, by my life, by everything I have, he will never touch you again. The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was hunger, fire, 2 broken souls finding each other in the darkness. Garrett Holden struck 2 weeks later. Dominic had flown to New York for an emergency business deal, a trip planned only 12 hours in advance. Impossible to delay. I will be back tomorrow morning, he said, holding Ivy too tightly before getting into the car. Do not leave the estate. Keep the dogs with you at all times. He kissed her, kissed Ren's forehead as she slept. Then he was gone. At 2 in the morning, the security system on the south perimeter went dark. A guard inside the estate, bribed with $200,000 from the Corsetti family, had done his work well. 15 gunmen breached the fence. Victor took a bullet to the shoulder before he could raise the alarm. The last word he managed before losing consciousness was a name. Ivy. She woke to Phoenix barking, not his normal bark, a sound of pure animal terror that told her everything she needed to know. Ivy sat up in darkness, heart hammering against her ribs. The 3 dogs stood in front of her bedroom door, attack stances locked, fur bristling, growls rolling from their throats like engines of war. The door exploded inward. Garrett Holden stepped through, 4 masked gunmen behind him with submachine guns raised. He looked older than she remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. But his eyes were the same, cold, empty, hungry. Hello, sweetheart, he smiled. Miss me? The dogs lunged. Stop, Holden shouted. 1 move and she dies. The gunmen swung their weapons toward Ivy. She screamed a command. The sharpest tone she had ever used, and Titan, Orion, and Phoenix froze mid-stride. Their bodies trembled with the need to attack, but they held. They held because moving meant she would die. From down the hall, she heard a child screaming. "Ren!" Ivy gasped. "Bring her!" Holden ordered. A gunman dragged Ren into the room. The 7-year-old was crying, clutching Mr. Pepper to her chest, her honey-brown eyes wide with terror. "Miss Ivy!" she sobbed. Holden crossed the room and grabbed Ivy by the hair, yanking her up. The first punch slammed into her cheek, the second into her stomach. "You thought you could run from me?" he snarled. "You thought some Mafia bastard could protect you?" He hit her again. Again. "Do you know why I killed that boy?" he whispered in her ear. "Your precious Kieran. Not because he hit me. Because he looked at me with eyes that did not fear. I hate eyes like that. So I pushed him, and I watched them break on the pavement." Ivy felt her heart shatter all over again. "And your baby?" Holden continued. "I do not regret that for a second. Evidence. I do not leave evidence." He stood looking down at her with sick satisfaction. "Now you are coming home with me, and your Blackthorn will receive your head in a box if he dares to follow." Ivy lay on the floor, blood dripping from her lip, pain screaming through every nerve. Ren was crying. The dogs were trembling with restrained fury, and Phoenix was watching. Phoenix, the smallest, the most broken, the one who had been used as bait, who had learned that obedience was the only way to survive. Phoenix looked at Ivy, at the woman who had sat with him in silence, who had told him about her brother, who had sung to him during the storm, the woman who had saved his soul. Ren had crawled behind the overturned dresser the moment the dogs attacked, clutching Mr. Pepper, her small body hidden from the gunfire. And something in Phoenix finally broke free. He let out a howl. Not a cry of fear, the call of an alpha ordering attack. Titan and Orion understood instantly. All 3 dogs exploded into motion. Titan launched at the nearest gunman, his jaws crushing the wrist holding the weapon, the sound of breaking bone mixed with a scream of agony. Orion struck from the side, 130 pounds of muscle slamming a second gunman to the floor, fangs sinking deep into flesh. The remaining gunmen opened fire wildly, bullets tearing into walls and furniture. But Phoenix did not go for the gunman. Phoenix went for Holden. The dog charged straight at the man who had hurt Ivy, jaws wide, fangs gleaming. Holden barely got his arm up before Phoenix's teeth sank into his forearm, ripping muscle, wrenching until the gun fell free. Holden screamed, drew a backup pistol from his ankle holster, aimed at Phoenix's head. "No!" Ivy screamed. The gun fired. The bullet tore through Phoenix's shoulder. The dog howled in pain, but did not let go. He clamped down harder, shaking his head, ripping until Holden's grip weakened. Then Holden aimed at Ivy. "If I cannot have you," he snarled, blood pouring from his mangled arm, "no one will." Phoenix saw the barrel point at the woman he loved, and the dog who had spent his life being afraid made the bravest choice of all. He released Holden's arm and threw himself between Ivy and the bullet. The gun fired. The bullet struck Phoenix in the chest. The impact threw his body backward. He collapsed at Ivy's feet, blood spreading across his pristine white coat like roses wilting in winter. Titan and Orion heard their brother fall. Whatever restraint they had left vanished. Titan's jaws crushed Holden's gun hand. Orion tore into his leg, dragging him to the ground. Holden screamed as the dogs ripped into his flesh, his arms, his shoulders. He would have died there on that bedroom floor if Victor had not staggered in, bleeding from his own wound, and pulled the dogs away. "Alive," Victor gasped. "The boss wants him alive." Victor, despite the bullet wound in his shoulder, had done one more thing before collapsing. He had found Holden's phone. The detective had been too arrogant to use encryption, too confident that no one would ever catch him. The phone contained everything: messages to the Corsetti family planning the attack, records of bribes spanning 15 years, photographs and videos documenting his crimes, bank accounts in 3 countries, and a folder labeled accidents. Inside were detailed notes on 7 deaths Holden had staged over his career: car crashes, suicides, drug overdoses, including a file on Kieran Callahan, Fourth floor balcony, staged as depression suicide. Sister too traumatized to be credible witness. Case closed within 48 hours. Victor clutched the phone like a weapon. This was not just evidence. This was annihilation. Ivy crawled to Phoenix. She gathered the dying dog into her arms, his blood soaking her hands, her nightgown, her entire world. "No," she sobbed. "No, no, no. Do not leave me. Do not leave me like Kieran." Phoenix looked up at her. His eyes were dimming, but his tail wagged. One final time. Wren crawled out from behind the dresser, tears streaming down her small face. She placed her hand on Phoenix's side. "Miss Ivy," she said, her voice breaking. "Phoenix says he is not sad. He says he was waiting his whole life for someone to love him. And you did. So he wanted to protect you, like my daddy protects me." Phoenix's tail twitched one more time. Ivy bent down and pressed her forehead against his. She began to sing. The lullaby, her mother's song. The melody filled the ruined room, broken and beautiful, a farewell to a hero who had finally found his home. Phoenix's eyes closed, his tail went still, and Ivy screamed. The sound tore through the night, through the mansion. Through every wall Dominic Blackthorne had ever built around his heart. Titan and Orion raised their bloodied muzzles and howled, a funeral song for their brother, a promise that they would never forget. Dominic arrived 20 minutes later. His helicopter had barely touched the ground before he was running, his face a mask of terror he had not worn since he was 12 years old. He found them in the master bedroom, bodies everywhere, blood on every surface. And in the center of the carnage, Ivy sat on the floor, holding Phoenix's body, singing in a voice that had gone hoarse from crying. Wren sat beside her, holding her hand. Titan and Orion lay on either side, guarding their fallen brother even in death. Dominic fell to his knees. He looked at Phoenix, at the dog he had saved 5 years ago, the dog who had never fully trusted him. The dog who had given his life to protect the woman they both loved. He had not cried since his mother's death. But now, in this room filled with blood and broken dreams, the Reaper of Chicago wept. 3 days later, they held a press conference. Not in a courthouse, not in a police station. In the lobby of Blackthorne Industries, with cameras from every major news network pointing at the stage. Ivy stood at the podium, Dominic beside her, Wren holding her hand. Behind them on massive screens, the evidence from Holden's phone scrolled past. Messages to the Corsetti crime family, planning the attack on the Blackthorne estate. Bank records showing $2 million in bribes from 12 different criminal organizations over 15 years. A folder labeled Accidents containing detailed notes on 7 murders staged as suicides, car crashes, and overdoses. And one file that made every journalist in the room gasp. Kieran Callahan, age 16, pushed from 4th floor balcony, staged as depression suicide. Case closed in 48 hours. Holden had documented his own crimes with the arrogance of a man who believed he would never be caught. Detective Garrett Holden used his badge to destroy lives, Ivy said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. He killed my brother Kieran when he was 16 years old. He killed the child I was carrying, and he would have killed me if not for the bravest souls I have ever known. She paused. One of those souls gave his life to save mine. His name was Phoenix. He was not human, but he was more heroic than any human I have ever known. The doors at the back of the lobby opened. FBI agents walked through, leading Garrett Holden in handcuffs. His face was bandaged where the dogs had torn him apart. His arm was in a sling, but he was alive enough to face justice. As they led him past the stage, his eyes met Ivy's. "You will pay for this," he hissed. Wren stepped forward, 7 years old, barely 4 feet tall. She looked up at the man who had tried to destroy her family. "You are not scary anymore," she said. Her voice rang through the silent lobby. "You are just small." The applause started slowly. Then it built like thunder. Holden was led away to face the rest of his life behind bars. And Ivy stood in the lights, surrounded by the people she loved, finally free. 1 year later. The autumn sun painted the Blackthorne estate in shades of gold and amber. Ivy stood before a small grave in the eastern garden, beneath the oak tree where Phoenix used to lie in the afternoon sun. The black granite headstone bore simple words, Phoenix, a small hero who loved without condition and sacrificed without regret, forever part of our family. She placed a white rose on the grave beside the old tennis ball Phoenix had loved more than anything. Dominic stood beside her, one arm around her waist. Wren knelt before the headstone, laying down a drawing she had made. Phoenix with angel wings, flying through clouds beside a teenage boy and an older woman. "I drew this for Phoenix," Wren said. "He is playing with Kieran now, and with Grandma. They are watching us." The wedding was small, just family in the garden where Phoenix was buried. Ivy walked down the grass aisle in a simple white dress, Titan on her left, Orion on her right. Wren scattered flower petals in front of them, Mr. Pepper tucked under her arm. Dominic waited at the altar, and for the first time anyone could remember, the Reaper of Chicago was smiling. "I spent my whole life building walls," he said, holding her hands. "I thought if I kept everyone out, nothing could hurt me. Then you knelt down in the middle of chaos and made my monster stop. You did not tame my dogs, Ivy. You tamed me." "I spent my whole life running," Ivy replied. "I thought if I kept moving, nothing could catch me. Then I found you, and Wren, and Phoenix. I stopped running because I finally found something worth staying for." Wren threw her arms around both of them. "We are a family now," she announced. "A real family." Titan and Orion howled, not in mourning, in celebration. 6 months after the wedding, Ivy stood before a mirror, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly. 5 months pregnant. The doctor had called it a miracle, given everything her body had endured. Ivy called it hope. Every night before sleep, she talked to the baby about their guardian angels, about Kieran, who would have been the best uncle, about Phoenix, who had given everything so this child could exist, about her mother, whose lullaby she still sang every night. Dominic listened from the doorway, pretending to read reports, secretly memorizing every word. 2 years of running, and finally she had found home. The final scene. A summer afternoon, 1 year after Phoenix's death. The Blackthorn family sat on a blanket in the garden beside the small grave. Ivy, Dominic, Wren, and the baby boy sleeping in his mother's arms. They had named him Kieran Phoenix Blackthorn, for the brother Ivy lost, for the dog who saved her. Titan and Orion lay nearby, old now but still vigilant, still guarding the family they had chosen. "Mommy," Wren said, looking up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Do you think Phoenix can see us?" Ivy followed her daughter's gaze to a single star that seemed brighter than all the others. "I know he can," she said. "He is watching over us. He always will be." Wren smiled and waved at the sky. "Hi, Phoenix," she called. "We miss you, but we are okay, because you taught us how to be brave." Dominic pulled his family close. The man who had once been called Death, the woman who had survived hell, the children who had healed them both. "They say I am a monster," Dominic said quietly. "They say my dogs were killers. But you proved them wrong. Phoenix was not a monster. He was the best of all of us. He showed me that love does not make us weak. It makes us everything." Ivy leaned into him, baby Kieran stirring in her arms. "Phoenix did not die," she said. "He just became something else. Light, memory, love. The best parts of him live on in all of us." Wren nodded solemnly. "Phoenix is a star now, the brightest one, because heroes do not really die. They just go somewhere we cannot see, and they wait for us until we are ready to see them again." The summer breeze carried the scent of flowers across the garden. Titan and Orion raised their heads and howled one final time. A song for their brother, a promise to remember, a vow to protect. And somewhere in the gathering twilight, if you listened very closely, you might have heard a third howl joining theirs. Faint and distant, but undeniably there. The end.